here's a guy that, yeah, he was a junkie and screwed up, but he sure pushed the free speech agenda legally.
Right.
And he couldn't say the things that he fought for now.
No.
We have no free speech, even though we have free speech. We have free speech for either the politically loudest or the politically correctest.
Right, there are a lot of things you can't say because they're not PC, right?
But it's just funny how the rules of life change, and even, is this a reaction to the freedom that was fought for, and now we digitally clamp down and think we're free?
Right.
And think about Brave New World. God, I'm glad people made us read that stuff. And
so that's the thing as I get older, is seeing these cycles. And when I was younger and idealistic, the old people was like, why don't they get excited like I'm excited about these things, right? And my dad was like, yeah, it's just a fad, whatever it might be, right? We'll see, right? And now I'm seeing, there's this pendulum. We're at this point, and then there's a reaction against that, whatever it might be, and we move to the other. But instead of getting to a midpoint, we go way too far, and then there's a blowback. And then you might end up in the middle, or you might not. But you see that politically, you see it in just so many things.
Do you think that the pendulum swings much less in the digital age?
More, because you got 24-hour news cycle. You can't get away from it. So once something becomes an issue, I don't know, that's a good question. I mean, once something becomes an issue, then we're so fractionalized. Because you had 3, 5, and 8. That was it. Right?
That's right.
That was it. So we all listened to the same news, and we did listen to TV news. And then you had TV. We shared a much more common culture.
Yes.
Because those are the only 3 channels, and the idea was, let's get the largest audience. And so you had variety shows. Variety shows had never worked today, really. You had Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
So you'd have the Beatles, and then Topo Gigio would come out.
Yeah.
And so, you had the young people would like the Beatles, the old people would like Topo Gigio or whoever, but that show was the idea, let's appeal to as many people out there so they'll all sit down and like something about the show.
Right.
And in the meantime, we all were then exposed to the same thing. And now, everybody has their own music, their own cable TV channel, their own news that they listen to, right?
And choose to get that perspective only.
That's all. We're on our own little bubbles. So I think it causes the pendulum to not swing back as soon, because we're hearing it's an echo chamber. And people now don't associate with people that aren't of the same political persuasion. That wasn't true.
It's so insulting.
It's not true of my parents' generation.
Yeah, I agree.
My parents had people that were very conservative friends and some that were really, really liberal. That wouldn't happen today. And I just know so many people. I'm a Democrat. I'm on the Democratic Executive Committee for Cuyahoga County, but I'm not far left. And so many of my friends, they won't have anything to do with anybody that supports Trump. I have a number of friends that are Trump supporters. They're well educated, they're successful, and we can talk about it. And I'm just, it's a shame how rare that is.
Yeah,
I don't agree with him, but I can talk to him about it, and I can even understand some of
it. And the ability to have respectful interaction and dialogue has diminished.
And we're guys and we'll joke with each other about it, and and we can talk about anything. We can talk about abortion. We can talk about whatever it is, capital punishment. We don't take it personally. I don't view him as a bad person because he has a belief that I don't agree with. There's a lot of talk now about whether we are more fractionalized than we've ever been, more divided than we've ever been since the Civil War. We can debate it, but having lived through not the Civil War, but certainly the Vietnam era, I think today does not compare to how split we were then. Because it wasn't just a war of words back then. It was an actual war. I mean, people were killed. They were killed at Kent State. There were bombings by the Weather Underground of artworks. Look at the Thinker in front of the Cleveland Art Museum. It was blown up by the Weather Underground. Did the same thing in Chicago. You had a bomb-making factory that the Weather Underground had in New York City that inadvertently went off. That they were going to plant that bomb at a camp in New Jersey, a military base in New Jersey. So I think people that weren't alive back then have a hard time comparing the two eras. The question on campus wasn't so much whether there was going to be a revolution, but when. I mean, that's how divided we were.
You know, Shaker had always, prided itself, and it seemed like it kind of disintegrated by the time I was a Shaker parent instead of a Shaker student, but it was being a incredibly open, place for unlike any other. And
that is its strength. Its strength is that almost everybody can find a place there. Almost everybody can find a group to hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it was the goth kids for a while, whether it was the jocks, whether it was and there isn't, compared to a lot of high schools, a lot of judgment about that. In other words, not one group so much looking down at another group. People kind of respect and appreciate that people are different. So I think that's one of the real strengths about that school.
It's a city or society that when you get sprung out into the realities of the real world and understand it's not like this.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the weirdest things that ever happened to me was working down in Carolina and a guy running a machine that I had to stand next to all day long while he tested out our product. He ended up having to talk to people because there's nothing to do, and he didn't have a drawl. And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Brooklyn." Mm-hmm. What do you miss most about the North? He goes, "Corned beef. I haven't had a good corned beef sandwich in 20 years." So I knew I was coming back down there the next week, and on my way out of town, I bought like 5 pounds of corned beef and rye bread and pickles and mustards at Corky and Lenny's, put it in a cooler and drove down. And when I got to the factory and the next day, took it in there for the guys on the line to have lunch. And the operator who had talked to me so nicely the week before and that morning, all of a sudden wouldn't speak to me after lunch. And after 2-3 hours, I'm thinking, what the hell did I do? Give you really bad indigestion? And I asked him, he goes, "Well, it ain't like it is up north. Everyone's calling me names because you and I talked, and then you brought that food, and he goes, I can't screw up my life down here and talk to you anymore because they'll think less of me." And I never.
So north-south thing.
Well, not north-south. It was like a racial thing. Oh, I'm sorry. These guys were all African American.
Oh, I didn't know.
So sorry.
So it was a racial thing.
It was a racial thing.
Yeah.
And that's why he said it isn't like it is up north. Whites and black people can talk together. And he's down here, you can't do that. And so don't talk to me anymore. And that just shocked me. And
wow.
As opposed to what we got, shown growing up, and
right.
It hasn't changed. How do you change down south or places without there being interaction? When we've gotten so polarized in this internet era, you wonder, when will people get back together and try to be together instead of just pointing fingers at everybody all the time?
What did you think Brown versus Board of Education, 1954.
Right, separate is not equal.
What I'm hearing, the stats are that we are more segregated now than public schools are more segregated now than they were then.
Really?
So who would have thought that?
Wow.
Right. And housing, I don't think is much different.
What's controlling the segregation? Just white flight out of neighbors or certain cities?
I think there's some of that.
If you got a population that's mixed, is it just that certain areas?
I don't think that housing areas are still pretty segregated. I mean, how many communities are very integrated just in Cleveland? Not a lot. Now, some are becoming more, Solon being one good example, Beechwood.
Solon, where Mackie Bentley's council person.
Right. So some are becoming more, but still most aren't. So the schools aren't going to be either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know the answers to all those things, but it certainly hasn't changed much, and I didn't expect that. Being an optimist and a young kid, I thought the war on poverty that Johnson launched was going to end poverty. You look back at that and go, how naive can you be that by throwing some money at an issue that would resolve it, and it certainly didn't.
Going to break the reasons for it. It might ease symptoms, but then when people realize, hey, I can keep my symptoms eased by...
But look where we are today.